Hello everyone, this is Jennifer Wilson from simplescrapper.com. In this video tutorial, I'm going to show you 3 different ways of getting your photos out of Picasa and into other software. And I will show you how to import your photos then into Apple Photos, Adobe Lightroom, Adobe PSE Organizer, as well as the software Mylio. So let's first spend a minute to talk about why we're even having this video tutorial. And that's because Google recently announced that they would be sunsetting the Picasa software. And that means they'll be no longer updating it or supporting it. While the software itself will continue to work, there is the concern over the long term that operating system upgrades, which these days often happen automatically, could break the future software. And with no updates to fix it, you could be left with an inoperable application with albums that are organizing all of your photos that you can no longer access. So it is my recommendation that you develop an exit plan for using Picasa. And that's what this video tutorial is about, is I'm going to show you how to get your photos out of Picasa in ways that will make it then easier to bring them into other software. The software that I'm going to show you are the examples that I recommend, but of course they're not the only options. And the strategies that I'm going to show you for getting your photos out of Picasa are really independent of where you end up putting your photos. And they can even help you use just a simple folder organization system if you choose not to use software any longer. So let's get started here. I'm here in the Picasa 3 interface and I'm on a Mac, but I think the interface is pretty similar and we should be able to not deal with any compatibility issues here between Mac and PC. And what you see here is I'm looking at a folder called December, and it's in my folders section here in Picasa. Now, when Picasa looks at folders, it's really literally looking at folders on your computer. So and this is basically Picasa acting as a file browser for you. The photos don't actually live inside the software or inside of any kind of library for the software. Now the difference here is that up here in this album section, this is a virtual organization system, meaning the albums that you create here inside of Picasa don't reflect any actual physical organization of your files. They're a data layer adding on top of your files. So the first strategy for getting your photos out of Picasa is that if your photos are all here in the folders section and they are organized in ways that are comfortable for you, whether that's chronological, a year and months strategy, or you're using events or a different type of cataloging approach. If all of your photos are here in folders and you're not using albums, there really is nothing for you to do in Picasa. All you need to do is then pick up that other software and import that photo library as it is, the folders, directly into that software. So that hopefully is some good news for some of you. Now, many others may be using these albums to organize your images. And so you see here, I've also created an album for these December photos. Now you could be in a scenario where your folders are maybe quite a bit less organized, and that's why you've created albums up here in order to group your photos by whatever approach works for you. And so here I'm using a year and month structure. And so from here, I'm going to show you 2 different ways to then move your photos out of Picasa if you're reliant on these albums, which again is a virtual organization strategy. It's a data layer, and how to move them out of Picasa. I'm going to right click here and select all pictures. And so the first strategy here is then to go to File, Export Picture to Folder. This allows you to select the location of the folder you want to create. It will create a folder within this location. You want to choose Use Original Size, automatic quality, which preserves the original image quality, and export. And it will export all of those images into a new folder structure for you. And so if you're going to use this approach, I would recommend essentially you're recreating a folder structure based on your albums. And so if your folders down here aren't very organized, they may be sorted by individual shoot dates from your camera. They may be all the photos may be in one folder, like my pictures. If you're reliant on albums, you can use export to folder to create a folder structure that basically mimics the albums that you've been using in Picasa. You'd press export and it sends those photos to this location. And I would recommend doing that on an album by album basis. So basically you're rebuilding your photo library one album at a time as folders on your computer. So that said, if you choose to use this option to export to folder, there's an important caveat to understand. And that's what you're doing here is you're creating a set of duplicate copies of your photos. And this new folder structure may very well be much more organized than your original folder structure. And it may become your master photo library. But you would still have to contend with any potential original copies over here in folders, because basically you've made a copy using this new folder structure of all of these images. And so that's something that you then need to deal with by deleting those original images. Okay, now here's caveat number 2. If you are shooting in RAW, and that's using a digital SLR camera that has a native camera file format, and your photos are either in that camera's file format, for example, my Canon uses the CR2, or you've converted those RAW files to DNG, one thing to remember when you're exporting to folder, it is creating a JPEG of those files. So if your originals are in RAW, you may not want to use this option because it's then going to create this new folder structure full of JPEGs. So those are just 2 really important considerations for this export to folder option. So we're going to cancel out of that, and I'm going to show you one other way that may be more attractive to some of you. So again, I have all of my photos highlighted here. And what I've done is I've added tags. I've added a December tag and a 2015 tag to all 246 of my photos. And what this does is these are keywords that become embedded in the metadata of the photo that transfer with those photos. So those original files now have this data attached to them. So when you import them into any software, you can even see it in your computer's native folder structure. It has this information attached to it. And that would allow you to use something like smart albums or saved searches to rebuild this album structure using tags. For some of you, this may be preferable because it does not create any duplicate photos. What you would then need to do, though, is identify the locations of all of your photos here in the folders, import those into the software, and then use those tags in order to recreate your folder structure. So there's 2 options here. One, you're basically manually recreating your entire album structure as folders, but this creates duplicates that you would then have to resolve. And then the second option is to use tags, which does not create duplicates, but then you'd have to use dynamically generated albums and saved searches and whatever software you use in order to recreate this album structure. And then, of course, finally, if you're not using albums at all in Picasa and your photos are nicely organized here in folders, you actually wouldn't really need to do anything. You can just import that whole folder structure into new software by finding it on your hard drive. I want to add one more food for thought for those of you who use DNG files or other RAW file formats inside of Picasa, and some just cautionary words about how you're going to need to move your photos. I mentioned already that if you're using DNG files inside of Picasa, when you do an export to folder, it will create JPEGs. So you can see here I have a set of DNG files, and when I exported them, these are now JPEGs. If you go over here to the info, you can see that this file went from DNG to JPEG when I exported it. So when you export a DNG to a JPEG, it will retain any keywords that you added. But a DNG that is not exported will not retain those keywords. Though any tags that you added inside of Picasa will be there in Picasa, but they're not embedded in the file. So that means that you really have two options. One is to do the export, use the JPEG files. However, I don't consider that to be the strongest option, because if you're shooting in RAW, it's because you want those original quality folder photos that are uncompressed, high quality, lossless images, and you have them there for a reason. So what I recommend is when you're using albums, if you have an album or any album that includes these raw file formats, you can go to File, Locate in Picasa. And what that will do is it'll pop it down to the folder that these photos, the original files, live in. So let's back up here. Let's say that your folders are totally jumbled. There's lots of folders here, lots of tree structures. Your photos live in lots of places. And that's why you've been using Picasa to organize them into nice albums so that you can print them to scrapbook, create photo books, whatever it is you like to do with your photos. But now you need this exit strategy for Picasa because Picasa is going away and you want to have something solid, a solid way to move your DNG files out of Picasa. So if you don't want to use that export to file strategy, which will create JPEGs, you can go to File, Locate in Picasa, and it will pop it down to that original folder. And so from there, you can create basically you'll have to start organizing your photos from within those folders. So I would even then recommend creating a new hierarchy system, create a new folder in this album structure, basically a mirror copy of your albums as folders. And then for every folder you find, move it into that new structure. It's a little bit more work, but if you are using these raw file formats, that's the absolute best way to get your original photos out of Picasa without converting them to JPEGs. Now that we've either exported our photos from Picasa or tagged them, I'm going to show you how to bring them into various other software. The first one is Apple Photos. Now, Photos isn't my absolute favorite photo software. I'll get to that later. But it is something that's free for Mac users, and for that reason may be very attractive to use. Photos replaces iPhoto and Aperture as Apple's all-in-one photo solution. But in the process, they did remove some features, and so it's not universally well loved. It does work very well though, and with a few exceptions that I'll talk about as we go forward. So one thing I love about Photos is that you can import images by drag and drop. So I'm going to take my folder here and just drop it into the window. We'll have to pause a few moments here for it to import. You can watch here this little progress circle showing you that it's working. And you can automatically see these are being imported with the tags that I had applied in Picasa. So that's great. It is automatically showing you the images by the shot date that is embedded within the photo. And let's scroll down here. Let's see, these are all coming in. It's looking nice. We're almost done. All right, there's our 243 photos, 246, and we're done. All right, so these are currently not categorized. They're just in a lumped organization. Now, here's one thing that you need to know about Photos, and I'll scroll back up here. Photos in the background organizes your images by import date. So the default is to copy the photos. Well, let's go to the preferences here. The default is to copy items to the photos library. And so that means all of my original photos are right here. And there's also a copy that lives in this packaged file called the photos library. Inside of that file, and here I'll show you what it looks like. I'm going to show in Finder, right click, show package contents, masters, 2016, 02, 21, because today's the 21st, and then here's the actual import file, and there's all of my photos. So we'll close out of this. When you copy items to the photos library, Photos is going to sort those by import date. Those full copies are still there, but your original photo structure, let's say your folder that was labeled December, is not going to be embedded into Photos. The alternate solution is to uncheck this, which I'm not going to do, but you could, and that would create a referenced photo library, meaning there's no photos to show here, there's just a library file, but there are no photos embedded into the Photos package. And it would reference all of your files originally here on your desktop or in your Photos folder in the structure that you have created. So if you want a really strong, organized, original foundation of one single copy of every photo, having that referenced library with this unchecked is a strong option. And if you like things to be very organized in both your files and in your software, that's what I recommend. But there is a caveat to that. And that caveat is you're not able to use the iCloud photo library to sync all of your photos across your other Apple devices if you do this. iCloud photo library can only sync this fully managed photo library. So there's trade-offs to every option. And as you're seeing in the photo management process, there's a lot of decisions to make about what works best for you. So we'll get out of this. That shows you a little bit about those two options. We've brought our photos in. And next I'm going to show you two ways you can organize them into Photos. So I'm going to create an album. And I'm going to call that December. And when you create an album, it asks you to select images. So I'm going to select all of these. All right. So I have an album called December, but when I add other albums, they're not going to be in a nice hierarchy. So what you can do is create a folder. And I'm going to call the folder 2015. So albums contain photos, and folders contain albums. Now, there's another way. Because we have these tags, you can do something different. You could also create a smart album. So I'm going to call this December, and then I'll just call it Smart Album just for reference here. We want to do keyword is December. Okay. And it creates a smart album with all of the same photos because they are tagged with December. Similarly, you can put smart albums inside of folders, just like you can put regular albums inside of folders. So those are your two options. You can have an album structure that's more manual, or you can have an organization structure for your photos that's based on keywords. Now, for most people, depending on what you're bringing out of Picasa, it probably makes sense to use regular albums for your chronological organization, and then to use smart albums to display tags that are more thematic or categories. So tags based on Christmas or people or locations. And that's generally what I'd recommend across software. But I'm showing you two options here depending on how your photos were brought out of Picasa. You can use either of these to get them into Photos. So before we exit Photos here, what it looks like when you bring a photo up, I want to show you one more thing. So here we bring up our little info panel, and you can bring these up for individual photos, and that's where you see any tags or slash keywords that you've applied. And you can see that I applied the tags in Picasa and they imported well. If you add additional tags, such as food or breakfast here, then in order for those to be embedded in the metadata of the photo, you would have to export the photo in order to have that metadata to be transferred to your final files. So if you were to ever need an exit strategy for photos and you were using additional tags, they are not automatically embedded. And related to the referenced versus managed libraries that I was discussing before, if you do have that fully managed library, you're also going to have to do the same thing you did to get out of Picasa to get out of photos, and that's to export your library album by album. In that regard, they work very similar in that the structure is however it was, and it's creating this virtual sense of organization on top of your images. So I just hope that helps a little bit. Next, I'm going to show you how to import the same batch of photos into Photoshop Elements Organizer. I'm here in PSE 14, and I am on a Mac, and I'm here in the Media tab, which is where you see all of your photos. Just like in Photos, I'm going to drag my folder into there, and it's going to automatically import all of my images. Here it gives me an option to import my tags, which of course I want to do. And that was super fast. That was actually much faster than the Apple Photos app. So I've got my new images in, and again, they aren't organized. Except you can go here and see folders. It automatically referenced all of my images to their home folder here on my desktop. And this would work wherever your photo is. If I right click here, I can do Reveal in Finder, and that would work similarly on a PC to show in Windows Explorer. And that shows the exact physical home of my photos right here on my desktop. So for those of you coming from Picasa, I think you'll find that PSE Organizer works most similarly to Picasa of anything, of any option, because you have these folders and albums areas. So the folders is the physical storage where your images live, and your albums are your organization layer on top of that, your virtual layer. So I'm going to create an album, and I'm going to call it December. And in PSE Organizer, your albums are done, they themselves can be hierarchical, unlike in Photos, where you had to create folders in order to add a hierarchy. All right, so it's giving me a warning that it already has an album because of the imported tags. I'm going to use it anyway. And then I'm also going to create an album category called 2015. And then I'm going to move my album into that. So there we have the same structure. Nothing in it yet because we have to go to all of our photos. I'm going to select them all and drag them here into the album. So we can see that all these photos are in the album. Now, in order to find photos by tag, as we previously illustrated in Photos, it works a bit differently in PSE Organizer. Instead of having smart albums, there are saved searches. So we're going to do find by details metadata. Keyword tags include December. And you can save this as a saved search. And so it's really the same thing as a smart album, but it's called a saved search. In order to locate a saved search, you can click this drop down in the search bar, go to Saved Searches, and here you can see any of your saved searches. And again, this is the one that's already open for us. And so that's how you would display photos by tag. That's a little bit less intuitive and a little slightly more clunky, but I do like the simplicity of the PSE Organizer and its ability to very easily reference all of your files in a nice folder structure on your computer without actually moving them and doing anything weird that would prevent you from exiting the software should you need to in the future. All right, next I will show you the very same procedure for Lightroom. As you all know, I use Lightroom for my own catalog, so I'm going to show you how I'm importing this photo into my existing structure, even though technically it's already there under the 2015 folder. I'm going to go here to this little plus sign and do Add Folder. I'm going to find the folder on my desktop. And it comes up with this menu which gives you options for applying. You could apply keywords directly upon import. Well, we already have keywords. We don't need to do that. Any metadata presets or develop presets. So there's a lot of options. If you are using raw files, you can convert them to DNG upon import. So I really like Lightroom's import tool because it allows you to accomplish a lot in that very first step before they ever get into the software. And all we're doing now is we're actually going to just add them as a reference file directly to the catalog. All right, I'll take a few moments for everything to get in there. And you can always see your current import in the location you told it to go, which is the physical location. It shows in your folders area, or there'll be a current import, which shows you the most recently imported images. That's always helpful, in case you forgot maybe the name of the folder you were using. So it's getting them all in here. It's all done. I've got that last image here. So you can see the folder here. All the images are there. You can see they're already pre-keyworded with 2015 and December because we brought that out of Picasa. And the last step I want to show you here is how you would create a view based on those keywords, if that's how you're going to create the structure. And in Lightroom, that would be called a smart collection. So we'll call this December. We're going to choose other metadata keywords contains December. And that created a nice folder for us that is based on that keywords. You can have nested folders in these collections. As you can see here, I have a physical collection, it's called a regular collection called Scrapbooking, and then I have smart collections under those for layouts, pocket pages, and projects. So you can create that hierarchy within your collection folders if you want to display display images by keyword or by other metadata. You can even create these smart albums based on so many different factors. It's quite a bit more robust than something like photos. And of course, what I like most about Lightroom is that it shows you your nice folder structure here, which means that your photos are very expertly cataloged in your Lightroom catalog file. That's your LR-cat file. And that saves the edits you make and the additional metadata you add, but your original photos live here in the folder structure and it doesn't move them around. So that's always super helpful. And another thing that I love is, let's say you're going to move photos, and this is what I do all the time. If I'm moving photos from my imported folder, I move them right in from Lightroom, I move them to where they belong, and they're moving them physically on my hard drive as well. So I never have to worry about syncing my organizational structure. It's just all there. It's completely transparent. And that's why Lightroom is my go-to software for photo management and my #1 favorite choice. It is well worth the $9.99 a month that you would pay for the photography plan of Creative Cloud, because that gets you not only Lightroom, but Photoshop in case you want to do more advanced photo editing or digital scrapbooking. So it's one of the best investments you can make for your memory keeping hobby, or if you're not a scrapbooker, just for the safekeeping and strong organization of your photo library. Well, I will get off my soapbox now when it comes to Lightroom, and I'm going to show you one more option. Finally, I want to show you an application called Mylio. Now, I am the one that is always recommending the most stable, time-tested, big-budgeted software programs. But Mylio is a startup that's gained a lot of attention in the past couple of years by being geared towards the eager amateur to professional level photographer, yet still being very easy to use, and its ability to sync your images across multiple devices. And so Mylio is not only a software that can organize your photos on your computer, it can help you collect images from various devices, and to me, even more importantly, once you do centralize your images, share them across those devices so you have a centralized photo library. It also works really well at managing the file sizes for you so that you can have your original images backed up while yet still sharing lower resolution copies to devices with less storage space. So this is what the interface looks like. And I'm going to show you briefly what I've been doing. I imported my 2016 folder. So far I have January, and it's syncing all of my photos directly from Lightroom. And I tested it. You can delete a photo in Lightroom and it's going to appear automatically deleted here. The one caveat is that your Lightroom edits won't necessarily show in here if you are storing those edits in the Lightroom catalog and not as an exported JPEG or TIFF or in an XMP sidecar file. I wanted to show you that there's very tight Lightroom integration here for those of you who are looking for a solution, an additional layer on top of Lightroom to sync your images across devices and to share them with others. So we'll go back here and we're going to start an import. We're going to import from a folder, and we are going to move the images into an existing Mylio folder because we don't want to create copies. We don't want to have any duplicates. Go to the desktop here, find our December file, and continue. All right. I'm going to create a new folder here, December, and import. So it's bringing all of the images in. You can see it's about average speed here. It's not super speedy like PSE Organizer was, but it's about average speed. And we're bringing all of our photos in. All right, so you can see we have all of our images here. And if we open up one, we can see that they are keyworded. It also added keywords based on the folder that was originally added. So here in our Mylio Pictures folder, we have the December photo folder, and you can see it did remove it off my desktop. It did move it into its own directory structure, but it's not a package structure like in Photos. Here I've revealed the folder in Finder. You can see there's Mylio Pictures, December, and December JPEG. So it has that folder structure that you assign to it. Now, similarly to PSE Organizer, you can do searches based on keywords. So let's search for 2015 here. And it brings up all photos tagged with 2015. In order to save that search, you'd go back here to the search menu that pops up, and you would pin it into the search field. And that would save that keyword 2015 or any other search that you conduct as a saved search for you. This works very similarly to PSE Organizer in that regard. Thank you for watching this tutorial. I hope this is beneficial to Picasa users who are looking for an exit strategy as well as a new long-term solution for photo management. My name is Jennifer Wilson, and you can find me at simplescrapper.com.